Inflation, the cost of employee turnover, diffusion of innovation, and motivation are the four things from Intro to Business that resonated with me the most. So here's what those four things are and my thoughts and opinions on each of them. Inflation, in the simplest sense, means that the price of goods goes up. This can happen for three main reasons, according to the government website of Australia. Demand pull is the first reason. Demand pull is simply just supply and demand. There are more people who are wanting the supply, so there's certain goods, and more people want that than there are that actual product. That would be supply and demand. The demand is higher than what's actually available, therefore the price will go up. The next one they say is cost push. And cost push is when the actual suppliers of the goods have to pay more. So the supply for the manufacturing and production of goods costs more. An example of this is oil. When oil prices go up, that means it costs more to make the actual items, therefore causing the price to go up and inflation to happen. And the final cause of inflation that they give is inflation expectations. So consumers and companies that produce goods will price and buy based on their predictions of what inflation will be. And if a large enough number of people do this, it can actually affect the real inflation numbers. This is a graph of the inflation percentages of the United States from the year 2012 to the year 2022. Although inflation was high throughout the years from 2012 to 2020, the highest percentage was 2.3 out of those years. Yet in 2021 and 2022, inflation skyrocketed to 7 and 7.1%, meaning that the price of goods was so much higher than it was the year before. The main true reason why that's so high is because of the government stimulus checks that were sent out during the COVID-19 pandemic. This is touching specifically on that supply and demand aspect of why inflation goes up. The CPI, or Consumer Price Index, and the core CPI numbers have come out for November, and the inflation percentage is less than what it was last month. However, inflation is still high. That drop in inflation is likely due to the Federal Reserve increasing interest rates, which makes it harder to take out a loan and therefore will lower the supply. But this also means that there are less opportunities for companies to innovate, which is problematic for the economy in other ways. So all around, this inflation is very bad and could have been avoided if the federal government did not spend billions and billions of dollars on stimulus checks that will now have to be paid for by Americans for decades. Employee turnover is the amount of people that are hired by a company, and they're hired to replace people that have actually left the company or that were fired by the company. High turnover can be detrimental to a company's budget. There are massive external costs around actually hiring new people to replace the old ones that wouldn't exist, such as getting the company's name out there to applicants, like job postings and advertising. That costs a lot of money. Then once you have applicants, the whole hiring process and having recruiters from the company and having background checks, that's all expensive things. And then once the employee actually gets hired, that there are the costs of onboarding, training them, HR costs, an HR employee has to be hired. So those are all major costs that would be avoided if the original employee had just stayed. I think it is extremely important that companies keep the employees that they have. With all of the costs that come from hiring new employees and also training them, which could take years to get them to the same level as an old employee, it seems almost obvious that a company should do everything possible to keep their employees that they have. This is a cold morning. They've been there for hours waiting to get the new phone. That is because they are the innovator. So this image, this bell curve, is the diffusion of innovation graph. So all the way on the end, that's basically when the product is released. So that's the innovators, right? The innovators are that small amount of people, very small amount of people who are just there, that'll sit in the cold in the winter, or sleep all night just to get the new iPhone so everyone knows they have it. Then there's the early adopters, which are not as extreme as innovators, but they're still some of the first people to get it. Then towards the middle, you have the early majority and the late majority that sort of just wait to see what happens, but don't wait until the very end. And then all the way at the end, once the product has really been fully released, everyone has done it, and the product has been out for a while, there's the laggards who go to Dollar Tree, for example, don't really care if the product's new, they just want the best deal, and they want to also know that it's good. So in my opinion, I think that there are benefits to both. I personally do think there's some merit to being an innovator. You get to be able to try some of the new things that could end up being a trend or something that actually is good. So that's something that's good. But also a laggard, they are able to get good deals likely because all the people who are before them, they already have bought the item. So companies are trying to sell them and they'll give discounts to the laggards. Then they also will be able to make a more educated decision because an early adopter doesn't have a lot of information. There's not a lot of trial, but a laggard has a lot of information when making a product decision. The motivation of a customer or an employee is so important to a company. In terms of customers, the company and the marketing team need to know how can they get these customers to go out to go purchase their item with their credit card, to go to a store and go to a promotion, to spread information about their product. They also need to know how to motivate their employees. They need to know what makes their employees do work. Abraham Maslow is a psychologist, and he developed a hierarchy of needs that are now known as Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's a pyramid with 5 different levels. Starting at the bottom is physiological needs, and that's sort of things that we need. Humans need to survive. So air, water, food, things that were absolutely biologically necessary for survival. And the next level up is safety needs. So things from just security to financial security to health. Then there's love and belonging. So that's things like friendship, intimacy, and all different kinds of things that are like love and belonging. And then esteem is actually being able to respect yourself, respect others, have recognition, be known. And then finally, self-actualization. Self-actualization is almost impossible to reach. And that's just when you're you can't become any better. You can't be any happier. You can't become any better. And something unique about Maslow's hierarchy of needs is that you cannot move on to another level without reaching the level below. I found that so interesting how you can't move on to another level, which is really shown because of the worries, right? So if someone is at self-esteem, right, if someone is at safety needs, they can't worry about the stuff that a self-esteem person worries about. To be able to recognize if someone is in the stage of safety needs, they're not going to really care about a product that helps them with their self-esteem because that's not going to be on their worry. They're only going to be worrying about their safety needs. And I think it's also really interesting to be able to figure out what motivates people because there's so many different things nowadays that people can do and people can buy. And it's really interesting to see what motivates people to sort of make a purchase or make an action. One of the biggest takeaways I have from Intro to Business is the importance of knowing people, specifically knowing your customers and who you are targeting in terms of marketing and sales, but also knowing who you work with and knowing how to communicate and how you would work best with people. So things like being able to work with people who you're compatible with or having good communication with everyone in the company. That really relies on knowing people and what they want and how they'll respond to what you ask and what you tell them. Those are the 4 things that I chose to discuss and that resonated with me. They have information that can be used in the business world and everywhere else. And that is why I find them so interesting and useful.